We're here for Music with Purpose with a very exciting lineup of guests from the Hofners, a wonderful Beatles tribute band. We're so lucky to have them here tonight. With us from the Hofners, we have Mike Strito, who is the leader of the band, and he is our Ringo. And we have Charles Rosenay, who is the Hofners promoter. Welcome to Music with Purpose. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us, yeah.
I'm excited to have you here. I've been excited this year because it's the 50th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper's,
right,
which I'm sure you all are celebrating as well.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable actually.
Tell me a little bit about what you are doing in the Hofners to celebrate that landmark anniversary.
Well, we're actually this year we're dressing up and doing that album, plus some Magical Mystery Tour. That's also 50 years in December. They both came out the same year. So yeah, we're actually, the Hofners normally did 62 to 66. We didn't get into Pepper. So yeah, so my guys especially really excited about it because it gives us a chance to go into that other era with the most beautiful costumes around. So yeah, it's pretty wild.
For many years, the Hofners were the Ed Sullivan Show. When you picture the Beatles in the earliest years, She Loves You, I Want to Hold Your Hand, that's what the Hofners really specialized in. So now it's the materials they've been wanting to do all these years and finally have a reason to for the 50th anniversary.
Fabulous. Well, let's talk about the Hofners a little bit. I know the Hofners logo is in that special Beatles typeface or font that we all recognize, so it brings us right there when we see the name. But the name has more of a connection than some of us might know. Can you fill us in on that a little bit?
Well, actually, we owe a lot to Charles. Charles actually more, people think he came up with more of it than I did. But Paul McCartney's bass guitar, the violin-shaped guitar, was made, it's a Hofner, it's made in Germany. And when we needed a name, my genius over here said, hey, about the Hofners. And at first I was a little leery about it, but it's fitted, and we bettered the logo. Neil helped with that as well, another helper with us. And yeah, but he could go on more with the name than I could.
Well, we're huge McCartney fans, and you know, when you think of the Beatles instruments, there's Gretsch and there's Rickenbacker's, and Rickenbacker was too long of a name, and Gretsch is too hard to spell. And there was already a band called the Ludwigs, which is the name of Ringo's drum set.
Drum kit.
So we thought the Hofners, yeah, it's the right amount of letters. It looks good with the Beatles type, and and it also gets people thinking, why the Hofners? So it gives more thought to the whole, you know, the name itself, rather than just saying the Beatles tribute band.
Exactly, and a little connection with the German phase of the Beatles' existence way back when in the early years, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing I'm going to say, he'll probably get mad at me, but all the great names, Ticket to Ride, and all the Beatle Abbey Road, all these names have been used. Although around the world there's probably about half a dozen Penny Lane groups and whatever, you know, we can go on and on. Either their songs or their albums.
There's a
Revolvers,
Connecticut Penny Lane. There's a New York Penny Lane. There's
Rubber
a lot of
Souls,
bands who. So we had to come up also with a name that wasn't already used.
And that was hard too. So.
Yes, and speaking of names, I know you all have collaborated in another Beatles activity, the newsletter Good Day Sunshine.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Charles was the editor-in-chief, and I was one of his writers. Yeah.
Mike was our news editor and features editor. It was pretty much an all Beatles. In the day, it was called a fanzine, a fan magazine, and it became obsolete as computers came along and everything is available on the internet. But Mike's articles were really special because it was called Off the Beatles Path, and it would be 60s acts and music from the era who had Beatle connections. Either the Beatles wrote songs for them or they were friends of the Beatles, and we put out that magazine every other month for about 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I missed that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about tribute band. The Hofners are a wonderful tribute band, and we'll get to see some clips of your work in the Hofners. It'll be very exciting for people to see that. It really takes you right back.
Yeah.
What is a tribute band versus a cover band?
The tribute group basically is a group that really tries to mimic the group and dresses and does all that stuff, versus a cover band just plays Beatles songs or whatever we're talking, a Doors group, whatever. Right? Would you say that?
It's a great question because there's a lot of really phenomenal Beatle bands now who don't bother with the wigs, who don't bother with the shoes, don't care about if they have the exact instrumentation. A band called Fab Four. There used to be a band called Beetlejuice from Boston, and because they sounded so note perfect, they're like the first ones to break out of the suits and boots kind of clone bands. But they're still tribute bands, even though they're not look-alikes and sound-alikes. But it's usually a cover band is a band that won't just do that particular music from that given artist, but will cover all types of music and maybe do a Beatles set. There's really not that many Beatle cover bands as there are tribute bands.
And this experience of the tribute band is really exciting because we sort of get to feel like we're there. I mean, the early Beatles, I know you've done that in the Hofners, and you were saying, Charles, that's sort of the way that they began and specialized, and now you're moving on to Sgt. Pepper's and the other sort of eras. How is that experience sort of exciting for us?
Well, the later material is a little bit more intricate, so there's a lot more going on, and you know, they just got better as musicians and as a band. You know, they weren't as simplified and everything else. So you're doing a little bit more thinking. And with this set, I mean, the outfits are just really colorful. Versus, although I like the Shea Stadium look, but as they went on, they got more flamboyant, so to speak. I think is a good word. Right?
But it's also music that the Beatles didn't do live. So it's really special for an audience if they're from that generation of having perhaps seen them at Shea Stadium or at some of their concerts. They would never have seen them doing a Pepper set or a Magical Mystery Tour music because the Beatles stopped touring in '66. And so when everything became recording from '67 on, there's no live shows of them doing that material. So when the Beatle people are seeing Beatle tribute bands and they're seeing Pepper and they're seeing Abbey Road, that's stuff the Beatles really didn't tour with.
So it's a unique experience. I mean, it takes us to that time as far as the sounds go, but the sights are new for people.
Of course, and we also find that a lot of the stuff, I don't know, Come Together and A Day in the Life and I Am the Walrus are stuff that maybe the younger generation latches onto a little more. You know,
Then I Want to Hold Your Hand or She Loves You.
Yeah, that might be a little perhaps too bubblegummy for them.
Yeah.
You know, so when they're hearing the later Lennon stuff, it's a little more, radical. It's a little more sophisticated.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of sort of my experience with the Beatles, too, that there's so much there in their body of work well, obviously you all feel that way because you've devoted so much, of your time and energy to it, but my son was interested in The Day in the Life that you just mentioned, and also in Strawberry Fields.
Perfect examples, yeah.
As a young guitarist.
Right.
My years with the Beatles, I had a 2-album collection. I focused on the first set. The first album was the one I listened to all the time. Yes. So having him have an interest in Strawberry Fields, I listened to it. I read a little bit about it, and it's one of my favorites now. And I didn't focus on it before. In fact, I would have said it's not my favorite.
So I appreciate the latter music as well, but I love the earlier music more. Maybe because I grew up with it, maybe it's a little more innocent, but yeah. But there's enough of that. I mean, like you said, the catalog is so vast that you span the gamut from a 2-minute pop ditty all the way to, a 13-minute classic like Hey Jude. It's just, it's everywhere.
I think I'm with Charles. I like the early years, what I call the touring years, where they actually toured, which would be like '62 to '66, And one of my favorite performances was the Shea Stadium when they played at Shea. It was just great, But I appreciate the later stuff. But we got so used to just doing the early stuff, and so it's kind of nice to cross over. But I think I feel like Charles a lot more with the older stuff. But it's time to move on with it, And,
let's talk about the Shea Stadium years and era. Was that your introduction, seeing something about that on TV or learning about that as a kid?
My introduction to the Beatles actually was the Help movie, so I was a year behind. My Aunt Susan Streeto, I got an aunt that's only like 5 or 6 years older than me.
Perfect for taking you around and introducing you.
Yeah, well, my parents went away for the day, and we all got put with different people, and she was into Ringo and the Beatles, and took me to a theater in New Haven, and she'd help. And up to that point in time, my idol was Vic Morrow of Combat. I was a guy that liked Army, and I got, all that, and play with guns, all that, and that was it. And I was just sold on the movie and that period. And of course, Shea Stadium was that year as well. So I really like that '65 period. Even when I'm playing, I'm in my glory when we're doing like I Feel Fine and Ticket to Ride, things like that.
Yeah, who wouldn't be? Ticket to Ride, fabulous.
Yeah.
Did Seeing the Help movie inspire you to become a drummer?
No, I was already banging on pots and pans. Actually, my idol was Paul McCartney in verses, but I'm a drummer, so. But I thought Paul was, actually, and George were really more of my favorites than the late George and the late John. But yeah, so I liked the way they were starting to form and look and all that. And I love the Shea jackets and all that, so yeah.
Through Good Day Sunshine, which you mentioned earlier, we also produced Beatle conventions for many years, through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And we had the pleasure and the honor of meeting a lot of people connected to the Beatles. Mike got very close with the drummer before Ringo, Pete Best. Spent a lot of time with him. And I only thought of that because, Ringo was one of the few people who never was that fan-friendly. There were never scenarios where he'd come out and hang out. McCartney was a lot more fan-friendly. John, of course, lived in New York and was very accessible. And but Pete Best, who was the drummer before Ringo, actually came to a lot of our conventions.
So persons attending would actually get to
meet him, get his autograph, take pictures with him.
We had some great guests. Actually, one of his favorites was Cynthia Lennon, John's first wife. One of my favorites was Alan Williams. He just passed recently. He was their first manager. He actually, we brought him to the States to do one of Charles' shows, and he actually stayed with me and my wife at the time, and it was pretty wild, him living with us. And I mean, we met him in England before that. So.
A lot of good conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
To say the least. Alan was a card. He was a character.
So Ringo's the least fan-friendly, and you are the leader of the Hofners, so you have a bit more of an outgoing personality.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, when I played with Yesterday, I was the group called Yesterday. They were from Las Vegas. We always the lady that ran the group always said I was the social butterfly of the group. Even when I was living in Lake Tahoe for a few months, and I just was. Even like if someone see me the next day, I was like that. So I don't know, it's just something I do.
And it's something we've carried on with the Hofners, because whether it's between sets or after a show, there's always people who would love a picture with the Beatles, and that's it goes without saying. It's second nature. After the set, they're not packing up. They're not getting ready to leave. They're out there taking pictures with the attendees, with the fans, with the people who've come to see them.
Yeah,
and I know you have had pictures taken with Beatles.
Yeah. Especially Paul McCartney.
Lifelong interest, right?
Yeah.
How did you learn of the Beatles? How did you sort of get into this?
My first memory in life is seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. And it's funny that Mike mentioned seeing Help in the movies, because I remember seeing Help. I lived in the Bronx. I grew up in New York. And my mom took me to see Help. And it was just screaming girls, as if you were at one of the Beatles concerts. And my mom was shushing them. She was trying to get the whole theater to calm down and be quiet so she could hear the movie. And meanwhile, they were screaming away. It was very funny. I remember that more than the songs and more than the movie.
Yeah, that energy, all of us, I'm a little younger, so looking back at those things when I was in middle school, seeing the films of those things, the energy and the excitement was absolutely contagious for everyone. And so everybody in my circle knew about the Beatles, loved the Beatles, although we're a little younger for that. I read something that there was an interview with the Police who have, said they were influenced by the Beatles, and someone asked Andy Summers of that band, "Are you a huge Beatles fan?" And the comment was, "Well, isn't everyone?" Question mark.
Great answer. Kurt Cobain. It's scary how many people will cite the Beatles as their, either an initial introduction to music or to being a musician, or their favorites of all time.
Yeah, the group that we like a lot too, the Monkees, were based on the Beatles' Hard Day's Night and Help movie. The whole concept of that, and group Badfinger had their sound, and Yeah, there's a lot of, the Bangles were like the female Beatles, you know, so we can go on and on and on, yeah.
You can, and you know, Oasis, obviously a
Yeah.
more recent
Right.
band that everybody sort of knows that they're influenced by the
Beatles-ish.
Beatles.
Yeah.
Beatlesque.
Beatlesque,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right,
But
right.
other bands who don't build themselves as Beatlesque, or who aren't described that way, you feel it in their music, you
Yeah.
hear it, and what a cultural impact that they had in really a short career, short
Sure,
bunch of
very
years, right?
short, sure.
Um,
And you know, we think of bands that wait 3, 4, 5 years before they put out an album, and the Beatles were putting out, what, 2, 3, 4 albums a year. It's amazing.
Plus touring in 64 and
doing
65,
films.
and making films, TV appearances, yeah. They were busy.
What do you do in the Hofners as far as your sets? Are they with one particular era of the Beatles, or do you mix it up a little bit?
Sometimes I've written a set where we'll come out and do all the 64 stuff. We'll go change into the Shade Jackets, and we'll come out and do 65 and a little 66. Sometimes I just mix it in both, you know, and we still make the change. Sometimes we won't wear the Shade Jacket. We'll come out with like a black turtleneck, and we'll mix it up, you know. So, yeah, it makes it interesting.
Try to do every show with at least 2 costume changes anyway, to just change up the visual.
I've heard that there's a lot of similarity in the Hofners' physical motions, methods of singing and playing that are really sort of spot on with of the two bands.
Yeah, I think it was this boy, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the Hofners played on Broadway not too long ago,
Mhm.
and it was a benefit for, I think, FIT, and amazing turnout, amazing show, and we captured some of it live, and one of our producers, Neil Quart, was able to edit the Beatles doing it with the Hofners doing it. And I think this is what it sounds like.
Yeah, let me ask you this. What are the sort of the lesser-known Beatles songs that each of you really like? Because I would love to hear that, because you know everything so well.
My favorite song of all time is The Night Before, which is off the Help soundtrack. It wasn't a hit, but it was a great song. And so now and then when we can use it, we use it. But I don't know. I change every year. I never liked it until about when the anthology came out. I was never a fan of Baby You're a Rich Man. It's off the Magical Mystery Tour album. And after that, I became a fan of it. Like it, every so many years, I drop and I pick up something else. So it's kind of weird, you know. But I like Thank You Girl. We do a few obscure ones. It won't be long. But we do mostly the hits, but I'm going to turn it over to you.
The song that you guys do and send it out to me is And Your Bird Can Sing, which was not a hit, but it was played in the Beatle cartoons, the Saturday morning cartoons. My wedding song was Here, There, and Everywhere, which
Lovely.
I absolutely love. But as the years have gone on, I think I'm skewing towards liking some of the stuff by George that I didn't really appreciate enough when it came out. And While My Guitar Gently Weeps is probably one of my favorites, like nowadays. From the
That
White
was
Album.
my favorite years and years ago. I
Really?
always would cite George's songs as my favorite Beatles songs. I don't know why. I wasn't a George fan. I was a Paul fan. But George's songs really spoke to me.
And they've held up so well.
They
Here Comes the Sun. It's just, so, you know, they're very. They haven't lost anything from when they were written.
They have held up, and it seems to me the whole body of work pretty much has held up. Maybe not some of the goofy songs that they did on live on the BBC.
Right.
But they're goofing around
And
because they were fun.
And they didn't write those, most of those.
Right. They were fun, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh, yeah.
do you guys have fun?
Yeah, we do actually. Yeah.
When they're on
We try
stage,
to
they
keep
do.
Yeah.
It's the before. It's the will they have a drum riser? Are all the guys? Yeah, everything before the show is not. It's not. It's always stressful, believe it or not. And then while the show's on, I think so many acts say they don't get paid for when they're on stage. They get paid for when they're in the hotel or when they're on the tour bus. And there's a lot of truth to that.
That makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Some people over the years, when they don't like to get dressed up, and some of us like to get dressed up when you come into that character. But I've met a lot of guys, when I'm looking for people, they don't want to get dressed up or they don't want to use any makeup, and so yeah, this again separates cover bands from tribute bands, you know. So.
And you're the Hofners Paul McCartney. What's Dane?
Dane, yeah. Dane.
He plays left-handed like
yeah,
Paul McCartney, right? Did he have to learn that special?
He actually plays guitar too. Yeah.
He's naturally lefty.
He's lefty, yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story. I DJ'd many years ago a bar mitzvah, and he was just a young kid there, and I put him on my speaker, handed him a guitar and a Sgt. Pepper outfit. We're talking about when he was probably 12 or 13, and because I thought there was resemblance to Paul, and he just lip sang a song, and who would have guessed that this many years later he's actually performing as Paul McCartney in a tribute band.
Fabulous, yeah.
Charles actually found him for us when we needed a Paul, so this was good. It was a good move.
Mention the other members of the band.
Yeah, Michael Montanola is my George, and he plays the George Harrison part, and he's actually from New York originally too, and I think he's living in Naugatuck now. So he's been with me the longest. We met different auditions, trying out for other bands, and both of us took a big liking to each other. And I finally lured him from the band he was in, and he's been with me since. And Marty, we just picked up a steady Lennon. He's from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Marty McGowan.
And he's working out good. He's working out real good. And he's got a lot of experience like I do. I think we probably have more experience than Dane and Michael. I think it's fair to say that.
Because they've been in other bands through the years as Beatles.
Longer, you know.
You've been in several Fab Four bands, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Fab Forever was kind of a spin-off of the Fab Four. It was under the same management, and I got to play with some great people there.
That was like an all-star. They picked out the best Ringo, the best Paul, the best George, the best John they could find from all over the country, and had them perform in Vegas.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
That was
we think we got some clips of that too.
And you actually did a show in Connecticut, one show.
Yeah, so the audience could see a clip of that. Let's see.
Yeah, I was fortunate. I played with some good players, and I played with some really good people, and I got some great moments. I always wanted to play in Atlantic City. I did at the Tropicana. I played in Vegas. I lived out a lot of things that I wanted to live out, and it was a lot of fun. And I stay in touch with some of these people as well.
A network.
Yeah.
You have a worldwide network of
Yeah.
Beatles aficionados,
well,
right?
of fans, of celebrities who were connected, you know, in one way or another to the Beatles, and of course, Beatle musicians. But we're continually, aside from the band, I publish the magazine, as you mentioned, and we also do Beatle tours to Liverpool. So every summer I'm bringing a group of fans to London, to Liverpool. We do a magical history tour.
Oh, fabulous.
And we stay in touch through the years, yeah.
And you are involved with Concerts with Causes here,
Yes.
which is affiliated with our show, Music with Purpose, and you give back to the community by allowing the Hofners to entertain us in that type of a setting.
Well, Concert with Causes is the official designated charity for the Hofners and also for our Beatle music festivals.
Fabulous. Well, we have had a wonderful time learning a little bit about the Hofners and reminiscing about the Beatles tonight. Thank you both, Charles Rosenet and Mike Strito, for coming in tonight.
Thank you. We hope your audience can come see us live sometime.
Yeah,
Love
man.
to.
Thanks for having us.